What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of Bro History. It's Henry Zamoda and Danny Abdeljabbar. What's up, Danny? How are you?
Chilling, man, as per usual. How you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty well. So allegedly, I may
Allegedly.
be. So allegedly, um, I have been putting things in the freezer, like in the movie Step Brothers. You ever see Step Brothers?
Yeah, but I don't remember this. What
So
exactly have you been putting in the freezer?
So, all
Please
right, let me
elaborate.
let me pull this back. So, my girlfriend is like, there was a bag, one of my girlfriend's bags, found in the freezer the other day.
Like a purse?
Yeah,
Why?
and I'm not sure. No one knows. And the following day, there was a towel in the freezer. So
Are you
I'm
sure?
the main culprit. I am the suspect of this,
Do
obviously.
do you or have you
I am the
ever
only suspect. I am the only suspect in this case.
do you or have you ever suffered from sleepwalking?
No, I don't recall, but I think maybe I may be pulling a Dale and Brendan. Brendan is Dale and Brendan, right? In
Uh huh.
Step Brothers.
Dude, I
Uh,
think you should set up some like
I think I
cameras. I
might
think you
be
should
doing
set up
that.
some cameras, dude.
We need to see. Am I waking up in the middle of the night and throwing things in the freezer?
It's either that or you have a ghost, you know, but a ghost that does weird shit.
Yeah, who just like tries to get me in trouble.
Yeah.
That's the ghost.
So it's
Oh,
actually
the
the
ghost.
ghost is like
We have ghosts,
deeply
but
in love with deeply in
the
love with
only
your girlfriend.
the only thing the ghost does is leave the toilet seat up, and he drops some pee on the floor sometimes. He won't close the trash can. But
Yeah.
he'll take the dishes. That's what I should. Every single time I mess something up, I do something incorrect. Um, I'm just gonna blame it on a ghost.
Yep. The ghost that's putting the bag in the freezer.
The ghost. Well, it has to.
It's got to be
It's
the
either
ghost.
a ghost or myself. But if a let's just say if someone leaves doesn't do a complete job on a dirty fork, or doesn't clean it all the way, blame it on the ghost.
It was the ghost.
The ghost must have used it. But what's up, guys? Thanks for joining us for another episode. So this is sort of, I guess, a part two
Yep.
to last episode.
Yeah, definitely.
Not to say that, well, I guess we have no idea how the content's going to turn out as of right now, but uh, I would encourage you, if you're listening for the first time, yeah, listen to this episode, but um, you may
Yeah,
feel a little
you might
lost
want to.
if you didn't listen to the episode prior about the origins of Al-Qaeda, the rise of Al-Qaeda. So I would encourage you to listen to that episode, but listen to this one as well. If you just want the details on this, but I guess to give you a quick recap, last episode, Danny and we concentrated on the really just the rise of Al-Qaeda out of Afghanistan, out of the Mujahideen, and how the CIA had a covert relationship with radical Islamists, uh, along with Saudi Arabia and the Pakistan, to create these, quote unquote, freedom fighters to fight the Soviet Union. And out of that nexus came Al Qaeda. Like Al Qaeda, that was the birth of Al Qaeda, and it was Operation Cyclone. And these are the guys who went on to, eventually, commit the worst terrorist attacks in American history. But not only September 11th, but the World Trade Center bombing in 1993, along with countless other terrorist attacks.
And
But they
foiled
came,
ones too.
yeah, I mean, they came from, our intelligence, essentially. Um, is there anything I'm missing, or should we?
No, I think what's interesting about this is that this story is extremely thick with like two C's. So if you haven't already heard the last episode, you maybe might want to go back because there's going to be a lot of names, a lot of people. There's a lot of it's worse than Game of Thrones. There's way too many characters. So we'll try our best to as we introduce these characters for this go around, we'll try our best to remind you of who they are and why they're important, but maybe brush up on that. Also, I think it's important to kind of point out that we did focus kind of on the timeline of events from like the late 70s through, you know, the World Trade Center bombing as was laid out by Peter Lance's work on the Triple Cross timeline, which I believe in our last podcast we put in the notes the link to that if you want to read along. That might be helpful. Yeah, I think that's pretty much the only thing we missed out on.
Yeah, good call. But I mean, let's just start with the World Trade Center bombing, which sounds terrible when you say it so casually. Let's just
start with a bombing. So
we ended the last episode talking about the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. This took place on February 26th, on 1993. A group of terrorists attempted to topple the World Trade Center with explosives in a Ryder truck in a underground parking garage. And the organizers of that were a guy named Ramzi Youssef, who was the head guy. You had Mohammed Saleh, who was one of Ali Muhammad's trainees. Ali Muhammad is basically he's a FBI informant / intelligence a double agent working for, you know, radical Islamist groups along with our intelligence agencies at the same time. And then there was also Mahmoud Abu Lima, another Ali Muhammad trainee who was the getaway driver for the murder of Rabbi Kahani.
Yeah, I mean, he was like the terrorist Uber driver for sure. Like, he did a lot of driving. Like, he picked up all of the you know, folks from the airport. Like, he was like the main driver guy.
Yeah, he was the Mark Wahlberg. He
was the wheelman.
Yeah. So they kill 6 people. However, the plan was, as awful as that is, the plan was to actually knock the North Tower into the South Tower and kill hundreds of thousands of people.
Right.
So it was supposed to be a lot bigger than it actually was. The scary thing is that if the bomb was placed in the right spot, they would have succeeded.
Yeah, and I think I want to jump in there because in our last episode we touched on this for sure, but like I got a chance to do a little bit more research on that, and it's kind of phenomenal how the physics of that would have worked, because it's not. I mean, first and foremost, yeah, if they were able to, you know, compromise the structure of the North Tower to get it to fall into the South Tower, it would be absolutely devastating. And that in and of itself would cause several casualties. But another big part of this is that if they had detonated it in a critical infrastructure spot, it would basically have like literally released the floodgates of the Hudson River into Lower Manhattan, right? So the way that the World Trade Center was constructed was the 2 towers were actually sitting in like these big concrete boxes underground, because the whole area was like basically a dump, you know. It wasn't like good ground, so they set up the foundation in such a way where obviously it's a tall ass building, it has to be several stories underground in order to hold it upright, but that would mean that it's also well below sea level, right along the Hudson River, right? So these big concrete boxes that they were sitting in, the initial plan was to actually compromise those concrete boxes, right? And by compromising the concrete boxes, it would actually rush in, you know, lots and lots of tons of water, you know, from the Hudson River, which would cause the tower, of course, you know, to be compromised. It would fall over onto the other one. But another crazy part of this is that all that water would go rushing into the subway systems, right? So, you know, Lower Manhattan, anyone on a subway in Lower Manhattan would drown in short order. So it would have been fucking nuts.
That's really crazy. So all the subway lines. So we're talking about in the financial district.
Right. AC.
We're talking about AC.
1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
M. I don't think the Q was around at the time.
The 4 or 5 line.
4 or 5. Yep.
It would probably seep into. It would probably get into the 6 train as well. The 6 line as well. Although the 6 line ends at Brooklyn Bridge.
Right.
The J line. We were talking about just thousands of people on the ground drowning.
Yep, they would just drown.
It's really ridiculous, and there's really no way out.
Nope.
Like there's no way out of a New York City subway.
I mean, the doors are like impossible to open, right? Like, have you ever tried like walking in between the subways, right? They're like, I'm a pretty big guy. I don't consider myself weak, but there's some pretty fucking heavy doors to open. Imagine now we're in a packed subway, everyone's freaking out, and now you're trying to open these doors to get out. And those windows are not big enough for most people to squeeze out of either.
Well, there's nowhere to go.
Yeah.
Like,
and then once you're in the subway, then what? You know? We also have
if you're
the
in a
third
tunnel,
rail, you know, which may or may not have short-circuited, but like, yeah, you're in a tunnel. There might be access points to get out and above ground at certain junctures, but you don't know where the fuck those are. The electricity will probably go out. It'll be dark as hell, and the water will rush in really quickly. You're fucked if you're in there.
And so if they succeeded, it would have been, I don't know, anywhere. It's hard to estimate or speculate what the casualties would have been, but it would have been hundreds of thousands if it was like really successful.
Yeah.
So it would have been bigger than 9/11.
By a lot.
Yeah. By a lot. And Ramzi Youssef, the bomb maker, he escapes to Pakistan afterwards. He leaves a threat letter saying that our calculations were not very accurate at this time. However, we promise you that next time it will be very precise, and the Trade Center will be one of our targets. So there was a threat that was, I believe it was discovered by the firefighter.
Buka. Yeah, Randy Buka.
Randy Buka was the one who discovered it.
Yeah, this guy, Randy Buka, was actually really interesting. Just quick note on him. He was like a former Green Beret, total badass. He like fell off of fell 4 stories and broke his back trying to save somebody in like a West Side tenement, and basically like in short order he was able to rejoin like the FDNY, the Fire Department of New York's like special, quote unquote, like their special forces team, like in a very short amount of time after. He's a total badass, and he was like, he'll pop up again I think in this story for sure.
Yeah,
but yeah, go ahead, sorry.
But so after the bombing, there was a FBI informant named Ahmad Salam. So he contacts the FBI. They had already kind of let him terminate him. They terminated him at this point, not killed him, but they stopped using him as an informant. And he called his handler up, Nancy Floyd, and he says that he could have prevented the attack if he was still an informant. So he tips the feds about Abu Lima, and how he fled Abu Lima, and how he flees to Egypt. So Egyptian police, they arrest Abu Lima. He confesses that the bomb plot originated in Afghanistan among Arab veterans of the Afghan War, and he tells them that it was approved by men. I mean, who knows what the hell was true, because
right. he was tortured for sure.
He was 100% tortured, but he blamed Iranian intelligence, but he also blamed Sheikh Omar Abdul Rahman, blind sheikh. So there is probably some, there could have been some. He also threw the Muslim Brotherhood in there as well, but
right.
Egypt could have threw in some like faulty intelligence in there as well, just
for fun.
You never know, because they said Muslim Brotherhood and Iran, who they had to this day have an antagonistic relationship with.
Right.
So who knows if it was faulty? But I mean, we know now that these guys were Al-Qaeda guys. These guys were Bin Ladenite and Al-Qaeda.
Right, 100%.
And it's kind of funny because going back in retrospect, after the world 1993 bombing happened, I was obviously too young to register it. I was 4. But after September 11th, there was really never that comparison to 1993.
Yeah, you're right. I didn't
Isn't
find
that
out
odd?
I didn't really find out too much about the World Trade Center bombing until later in life, well after.
There was that reference. I didn't learn about it until after 9/11.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
It was referenced oh, isn't it weird? It was bombed before, but it was by a totally different crazy Islamist group. It wasn't by the one
It's
that did
like,
right
this
now.
place is just such a hot target.
What
right?
really?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it was like such a hot target because they didn't compare it to 93 bombing. They compared it to Pearl Harbor.
Right.
That was a comparison.
Right. Exactly. That was just like, tantamount to war, basically.
Yeah, it's like, all right, we're getting all the boys together. It's about to be a wartime economy. We're going to kick ass. It wasn't.
But that was the plan, though. That was kind of the play, right? To get us into into Iraq War. Was it 2? Right? Yeah.
Iraq War 2, and
Yeah.
let's get to that because that's
we're kind of going down a rabbit hole a little bit.
We'll go down a rabbit hole, but yeah, it was never really. We never really learned too much about that. But yeah, I had no idea what, at that time when I was a teenager, middle schooler going into high school, I didn't know what the hell the difference was between Al-Qaeda and the Muslim Brotherhood was.
Right. Not even.
I was like, they're just, I don't know, like, aren't they the same thing? Muslim Brotherhood, Al-Qaeda, like, are they the ones that wear funny hats? Like, that was kind of like my level of ignorance.
Right.
At that time.
Or even worse was like the difference between Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. That was like synonymous with one another around that time.
How when Tulsi Gabbard just shoved, was it Tim Ryan into a locker on that when he said the Taliban did 9/11?
Yeah, I mean, like, that was some shit that, like, 12, 13-year-old me would have said, but for a grown-ass man who was in government.
And he's served on subcommittees. Like,
yeah, exactly.
It's not, there was no excuse for him to be on a debate stage and say something that ridiculous. That's something that Trump would have said, but he would have brushed it off. He'd be like, yeah, I meant that.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah, same one. Same thing. Tomato,
Yeah. Tomato. All I know is that they're pissed off. What are you saying? You like 9/11?
Yeah.
So this guy is sent back to the U.S. covered in duct tape.
Yeah.
Meanwhile,
the
FBI discovered a VIN number in the rubble of the explosion, and it leads to the arrest of Mohammed Salameh, who had take in mind, both these guys have been under FBI surveillance since 1989.
Right.
These guys
had almost been caught like dozens of times too, like leading up to this too.
They've almost been caught dozens of times leading up to this. Both of these guys were trained by Ali Muhammad. These guys were on the list, and they were able to almost cause this catastrophe in New York City. So this idiot is arrested after demanding a refund for his $400 deposit for the Ryder truck that they used for the bomb. Like, what a moron. So
for $400.
Yeah, for $400. And they're both, now this guy Salameh and Abu Lima, they're both charged as co-conspirators for the World Trade Center bombing.
Right.
So now later in June, Ali Muhammad, he's arrested, and this is like a very weird thing, and we brushed on this last episode. Ali Muhammad's arrested in the Canadian airport for trying to help his associate Assam Marzouk, who's
terrorist.
on a no-fly list.
Yeah.
Enter the United States.
Right. He's smuggling in another terrorist.
So not only is this guy on a no-fly list, but he's a Bin Laden bodyguard.
Right.
Who had smuggled with Ali Muhammad, who both smuggled Bin Laden into the Sudan. When Bin Laden was basically kind of exiled. Ali Muhammad tells, like, after he's arrested, he tells the Royal Mounted Police to call his FBI handler, John Zent, and they let him go. John Zent's like, yeah, this guy's working for me. He's feeding me information on X, Y, or Z. Something about like these, like a drug operation in South America. I think that was the excuse. But
before you go on, I think it's worth like bringing up some backstory on Ali Muhammad and John Zent, because these are two guys that we talk about kind of extensively in the last episode, but that is worth like noting again here. Ali Muhammad, this dude was originally like an Egyptian army guy, right? He gets kicked out of the Egyptian army because he was too radical, comes over to the United States, becomes a United States citizen, marrying some American over here. He lives in California. He ends up enlisting in the United States Army, gets somehow accepted into an elite special forces group in the Kennedy Special Warfare's command, I think it was. I'm forgetting. I don't have it right in front of me. Point is, it's a special forces thing. He's not really high ranking or anything like that, but manages to smuggle top secret information about like the locations of like Navy SEALs and Green Berets and shit like that all over, and Delta Force all over the world, and then does a war game with Egypt, which is taking place annually, and the Egyptians are like, yo, that guy Ali Muhammad is a radical, and he got sent home. This almost like upended the entire operation, and then from that point on, he just continually he gets enlisted as an informant for the CIA to like embed himself in various terrorist organizations. And for this entire time leading up to this point in 1993, where he gets caught, by the Canadian Mounties, he's just doing all this terrorist shit. Like he's training people, he's like doing all this shit, and the entire time, and this is why I wanted to talk about John Zent, who is his handler. This entire time, this guy John Zent, he's in the middle of his own personal shit. Like his daughter's fiance allegedly murdered his family, his mom, his dad, and his like siblings, to try and get an $8 million inheritance, and John Zent was apparently supposed to be the key alibi for him. So the whole time that he's supposed to be paying attention to Ali Muhammad, a terrorist, arguably one of the more instrumental people that organized all this shit, while he's not even paying attention to him because he's got this whole other set of drama and baggage going on in the background. Sorry, I needed to say that because that's one of my favorite interesting stories about this.
It's one of the most notorious triple agents of all time.
Right.
In American history. Mm-hmm. He infiltrated not only the U.S. military, but U.S. Special Forces, and was not only in Egyptian Islamic Jihad, Al-Qaeda, but it was also in the CIA.
And then later Al-Qaeda.
Yeah, I think at the same time though.
Yeah.
But what's also interesting is that Ali Muhammad, he had confessed to John Zent earlier, like a month prior, that Osama bin Laden ran an organization, and I just took this from the court case. Osama bin Laden ran an organization called Al-Qaeda and was building an army which may be used to overthrow the Saudi government, that bin Laden was operating camps in the Sudan, at which Ali Muhammad himself provided training, and that he had given anti-hijacking and intelligence in Afghanistan to Issam Marzouk.
The guy that he got caught with.
Yeah.
Coming to Canada.
Exactly. However, the report's destroyed.
Right, because when they went to go interview them, they just like got rid of the evidence. It's just like, nope, bye.
Yeah, it just sounds like garbage. Like, I mean, I don't know the reasons why.
No, the reason why is because it's fucking embarrassing. That's why. It's embarrassing that we had this guy on the government payroll, and he was doing all this shit. That's why.
It's embarrassing, and it's very, very hard to explain to really to anyone who would ask questions. Now, he also fails a polygraph test, but it is still released.
Well, I mean, those are questionable, but still, it's like after all of this,
those are questionable, But it's just like it's circumstantial evidence. Like it's just all of that on top of that is compounding evidence. Like it's not going to make or break a course. But the important thing about this is that this is the first time the U.S. government is given confirmation of the Al-Qaeda syndicate, and that interview never found its way to investigators in New York during the World Trade Center bombing.
Nope.
So this is the first. This is the first documented evidence that there's a syndicate called Al-Qaeda that exists that pulled off this attack in New York City, killed 6 people, and the evidence was destroyed. It's just ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. And part of this was, if I'm remembering the timeline correctly, there was some interesting like drama happening in the FBI around the same time, right? And that was around this guy Scarpa and shit. I'm losing the guys' names already. There's so many of them to keep track of. The TLDR version of the story is that there was some mob guys, and there was relationships between the FBI and these mob dudes that was, let's just say, not super kosher, and they were being investigated specifically for these things. And while they're trying to cover up for one fuck up, they also inadvertently block information from coming out for this particular stuff.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Some good context there. I forgot about that. But yeah, perfect. It's important to document this evidence was destroyed. Now, the FBI does connect that that KSM was involved. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who is one of the main architects of 9/11. According to a report, KSM had wired money to Mohammed Saleh back in 1992 from a bank in Qatar. Mm-hmm. It also turns out, unironically, that KSM is Ramzi Youssef's uncle. Now, I'm not exactly sure. I'm not exactly sure when that connection was made by the FBI, because it certainly didn't seem like they knew it back in 1993. Mm-hmm. I don't know when that was discovered. There was a blood relationship between KSM and Ramzi Youssef, but to this day, it took forever for them to link Ramzi Youssef to Al-Qaeda. And here you go. This guy is a blood uncle.
It's too bad that 23andMe didn't exist around then, right?
It's too bad. Or Genome Predictions, or whatever the other one is. So Ramzi Youssef is placed on the Interpol's most wanted list, and through the FBI's informant, they had an informant, Ahmad Salem. I forget, is it Salem or Salem?
Salem. I think
Salem.
Some people call him Salem because it sounds a lot like Salome, who was the bad terrorist, and Salem is the guy who he's an Egyptian also, but he's the informant who was working with Nancy Floyd on basically inserting himself into this particular cell, comprised of Ali Muhammad's, disciples and shit like that. And, he was instrumental in a whole lot of things. I won't give it all away because I think it's later in this timeline. But let's just put it this way. Salem was he's really good at his job. And due to office politics in the FBI, I don't think he was able to actually get it done.
Well, he's the one who discovered the follow-up plot to the World Trade Center bombing.
Right.
So there was a follow-up plot, and it was to plant a bomb at the UN, George Washington Bridge, the Holland Tunnel, Lincoln Tunnel, and then the 26 Federal Plaza.
Right.
It's the day of terror.
Right.
And the FBI. Oh, go ahead.
No. I was gonna say the whole business of him finding this out was pretty crazy, because Salem at the time was being handled by Nancy Floyd, who we'll talk more about as well. But there's this other guy, Nancy Floyd's boss, Dunbar, who basically had no background in terrorism, and then got assigned this post. It was perfect example of toxic masculinity, and just made everything fucking hard for them, right? So one example of this is Salem had legitimate reasons not to want to be he didn't want to be he didn't want to wear a wire, and he also didn't want to be to testify. And the reason why is because he had legitimate reasons, specifically that his family would have been in danger if he was made, right? And at the time, there wasn't a whole lot of, even till today, there wasn't a whole lot of like Arabic-speaking, assets in any of the intelligence agencies. I think there's probably like less than 100, So these like natural expats, like Salem, are perfect assets for anti-terrorism, because you're able to embed them directly into these cells, and so he was trying to play it safe and get real close to them, not wear a wire, not do all this stuff. So Dunbar comes on the scene, and Dunbar is basically telling him like, yo, you got to wear a wire now, and also you'll have to testify. And he didn't like it, so he had to pull out at one point. But before he did that, like, some of the crazy shit that they had to do was like, there was this one story on how they were going to wiretap them, where Dunbar is like forcing him, saying, you have to wiretap them, you have to get it going. And Khalid Sheikh Mohammed asked Salem to like debug his house, like to do a sweep of the house to like find out if there were any FBI or CIA or anything like that bugs. And Salem calls up, his handler Floyd and says like, yo, I need some equipment to do this sweep. And Dunbar is a cheap ass and doesn't want to pay like good money or give him like the good FBI shit. So they tell like the handler and a couple of other people, like, go to a fucking Radio Shack and pick up some cheap stuff. Apparently they were riding around in this limousine for like an hour or two looking for like a device that would help Salem do his job and like pretend to sweep the house for Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. And it ends up being that Salem just goes to like a hardware store and buys the equipment himself out of his own pocket, because Dunbar was fucking cheap and didn't want to give him the stuff that he needed. Anyway, so he did this plan where he put the settings on the machine to like basically go off for any reason, right? And he was like, oh, right here, there's a bug right here, there's a bug right here. And he did it in such a way where he planned it out where it wouldn't go off in the kitchen, right? And that's where he was going to bug Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. And then just to top it all off, the actual device that the FBI gave him to like record Khalid Sheikh Mohammed in their plan so that they can do the raid to stop it was a fucking like 1950 style like briefcase with a recording device in it, and it had this little red light that would go on and off every now and again when they were tapping into it, and it was just like a whole fucking like nonsense nightmare. But the point though is that he was able to get enough information out of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed to foil this plan. And just to go back to the plan, again, it was to bomb the UN, the George Washington Bridge, the Holland Tunnel, the Lincoln Tunnel, and a bunch of other places as well, right? And thanks to this guy.
Danny, don't be too hard on the FBI. They were fighting the war on drugs right now at this time period. Right. Yeah, they're preoccupied.
Yeah, they had their hands full. Mm-hmm.
They had. This is back in the day where counterterrorism wasn't the top priority. It was putting guys like Freeway Ricky Ross behind jail.
Oh,
in jail.
Ross. Not that Rick Ross. I know, Henry. God.
But I mean, it does lead to the arrest of the 8 people are arrested.
Right.
Were involved in a plot. They arrest Blind Sheik.
Right.
And what's interesting is that when the FBI arrested Blind Sheik, they find a business card from Mohammed Jamal Khalifa, who's Bin Laden's brother-in-law.
Uh-oh. There's the connection.
Along with $62,000 in cash. And it turns out that Khalifa is funding militants worldwide using a charity in the Philippines as a front.
Nuts.
And take in mind, this guy is also someone who the CIA helped get a visa into the United States.
Jamal Khalifa? I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah. And he was arrested 2 weeks later. That's not true. But the CIA
let him in.
They helped him get a visa.
Bin Laden's fucking brother-in-law.
He applied to a visa in Saudi Arabia, and the CIA helped him out. So I don't know, man. There seems to be a connection here.
There's a pattern. There's like a
There's
pattern of like
there's a pattern.
dumb shit.
It's like I know the government's stupid, but how dumb are this? So he's arrested. So he's arrested 2 weeks after getting into the country. And by '94, and take in mind we're skipping over a bunch of stuff.
Yeah,
It's
a lot.
it's hard. It's a lot of key things. But in the spirit of time, by '94, Ramzi Youssef is the world's most wanted terrorist. He's working out of the Philippines himself, and while he's in the Philippines, he conceives of three plots. One is to kill Pope John Paul II on his visit to Manila in January 1995. He wants to create an undetectable liquid-based bomb to be smuggled on board 11 U.S. jumbo jets entering the U.S. from Asia. He names this the Bojinka plot after the
Big nose.
after the Serbo Croatian term for big nose. And the last one, which is interesting, is that with this is like the origins of 9/11. So with Abdul Hakim Murad, the pilot trained at 4 U.S. flight schools, Youssef will coordinate the training of Islamic pilots at U.S. schools who will then commandeer airliners and fly them into buildings in America.
Right, and this is one of the same guys that was like hanging out with this Ali Muhammad cell, right? Same guys.
So this is 9/11. This is the origins of 9/11. To train people in flight schools to fly into buildings.
Mm-hmm.
He's
the progenitor of that.
This is where the idea came from. So on Christmas Eve in '94, there's a dress rehearsal for this, and it takes place. It's by Algerian terrorists. They hijack an Airbus and they attempt to fly it into the Eiffel Tower.
Yeah,
they end up landing the plane because they have to refuel it, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And they end up in a standoff in the cops. They kill a couple of passengers, but it doesn't go down the way it happens. In '95, so I'm reading right from this timeline right here. So on the night of January 6th, while mixing chemicals in his Dona Josefa bomb factory. Is it Josefa or Josefa?
Josefa, maybe?
Josefa bomb factory.
Yeah.
Youssef accidentally ignites a small fire that fills the room with smoke. The Manila police are called. Youssef and Murad tell a rookie cop that they are just playing with firecrackers. He buys the story and leaves.
All right, so stop right there. This guy is building a bomb, right? And planning the attack, and I believe if I'm correct, this is supposed to be the attack against Pope John Paul II that they planned, right? In Manila, and he fucks it up. The cops come, and he just says, "Oh no, we're all good. We were just playing with firecrackers," and they buy it, and they just leave, like utter facepalm.
But when he reports the firecracker story, his superiors become suspicious.
Yeah.
His captain gets suspicious, and they end up confronting Murad, and they escort him out of the they try to escort him out of the lobby, and he takes off running.
Right. Well, this is specifically Murad, right?
It's not Youssef.
They catch Murad, and then when he knows the jig is up, he tries to run. The lady, Captain Ada Fariscal, the one that doesn't buy the firecracker story, who told everybody to go back and check it out. Let's go check it out again. She actually ended up shooting at him. She missed, but it caused him to trip and fall, and then they arrested him. And then basically they try to bribe her with $2,000 of American Express checks, but it didn't work. And she pressed to have to go and see their room. And I think when they actually got to the room, they found not only a bunch of money, but also pictures of Pope John Paul II and chemicals for making bombs and shit. And also they got Yusef's laptop, which had a bunch of information on that. But as you pointed out, they didn't catch Yusef. Yusef was across the street, and he watched the whole thing go down.
Where he then joined his uncle, KSM. And both these guys are going to get down to plan the 9/11 attacks.
Right.
So Murad is taken to a Camp Crane in Manila for questioning, and allegedly he's tortured.
Oh, he's definitely tortured for sure.
Yeah, well, he most likely was tortured. And then he's handed over to, I guess, an expert, but Colonel Mendoza, Rodolfo Mendoza, and he gets him to confess the details of the World Trade Center bombing, and he admits the role in the role to bomb the Pope and the Bojinka plots. Apparently, he threatened to hand him over to the Mossad. 2 weeks later, he confesses to a plan to fly a plane into the CIA headquarters.
In Virginia, right?
In Virginia. And then finally, he admits to that there are Islamic terrorists who are currently in U.S. flight schools, and their ultimate target is the Pentagon, the CIA, the Sears Tower, and the World Trade Center.
And the Transamerica Tower in San Francisco.
And the Transamerica Tower, and I think a nuclear facility as well.
Yep.
So he confesses to this Filipino colonel that there's currently sleeper cells right now in the United States that are preparing, that are in flight schools, getting ready to fly planes into buildings. Mendoza, he turns this information over to the U.S. Embassy, and the FBI does acknowledge it in the secret memo. However, the memo doesn't mention anything about the training schools, the training in the U.S. flight schools. Mm-hmm. So they just talk about the Pope, and they just talk about they talk about everything else within the terror plot besides
the fact that they're training in U.S. flight schools
in the U.S., which is just I just don't have really an explanation for that.
I mean, on the one hand, you could say, like, in the moment, this information was obtained through torture, so perhaps, giving them the benefit of the doubt and them being very liberal with this right now, perhaps they had reason to believe that the connection to U.S. training in U.S. flight schools was not credible. But the fact that they just left it out of the memo at all and didn't mention, like, hey, they also said that they were training in the U.S. in flight schools. We don't know if that's accurate or not, but
I guess at the time it was like, oh, what? Really? We're more concerned about the bombs that you're going to be smuggling on U.S. jumbo jets. Now, do you know anything about the liquid-based bombs that they allegedly were going to use?
No, but apparently, what's his face? Yusef used one previously, right? So there was that one flight that he took back in '94. He was able to this is an interesting story. He was able to take he was able to falsify some documents to pretend that he was an Italian government official, Amaldo Fortani, I think his name was. And so what he did, this was part of his test run of how to smuggle a bomb onto a plane, right? And he booked a flight from Manila to Cebu, which had ongoing service to Japan, right? And apparently using some not even crazy things, he was able to put together a bomb on the plane on the first leg of the flight, right? And so some of the things he used was his Casio watch. I don't know if do you remember them talking about Casio watches and you're not able to bring them on planes a long time ago? Do you ever remember that? Those special Casio watches?
Yeah, I do.
It's vaguely reminiscent of that. So basically,
I do vaguely remember that.
So he was able to use this watch as a timer, It was like kind of like the first smartwatches before there were smartwatches. He's able to use that as a timer, and then also he used the specific chemical that you're asking about is a diluted nitroglycerin, right? And he just put it in a regular contact lens, like cleaner bottle, and fucking jerry rigged the shit together, put it underneath the seat in the life preserver, what do they call it? Life vest compartment of the seat that he was sitting in. And then he gets off at Cebu, and then the plane continues on to its trip to Japan. The timer goes off, the bomb works, it explodes, but all it does is it kills the passenger, the poor passenger that was sitting in that seat after him, and then the plane was forced to land in Okinawa. So they made an emergency landing in Okinawa, Japan. But that was like his proof of concept that you can bring specifically diluted nitroglycerin onto a plane in a contact lens bottle, like contact lens cleaner bottle case.
Sorry, I just got distracted by a fly that's flying around me right now, and I've been trying to grab it, but no, that's just totally insane. Now, this is like where things get pretty crazy. And the FBI, take in mind, the FBI does admit that Ramzi Youssef wanted to return to the United States to bomb the World Trade Center a second time.
Yep.
I think it's very clear at this point.
Mm-hmm.
When you fast forward over to the Day of Terror trial,
Mm-hmm.
so now we're not talking about the plot stemming from the Philippines. We're talking about the plot prior to bomb the New York City landmarks, the GW Bridge,
Right. Mm-hmm. The UN,
the UN, Lincoln and Holland Tunnel. Now, this is where things get really weird. When the Day of Terror trial begins, Ali Muhammad is listed as a unindicted co-conspirator. Attorneys Andrew McCarthy and Patrick Fitzgerald, they convince him not to take the stand as a witness because they don't want to reveal that intelligence agencies were funding radical Islamists in Afghanistan. Because, well, think about it like this. In the defense trial, the only way that you can put up a defense against this is say that, my client was a product of this CIA operation to radicalize Islamists to fight the Soviet Union. He's a product of U.S. intelligence.
Right, like you trained him to do that, and that's why he did it, right?
Exactly.
Which is a fucking weak-ass argument, but I guess it's the only real argument you can make,
It's the only real argument you can make. It's a bitch-ass argument, and he deserves absolutely be jailed forever.
Mm-hmm.
However, that would be the defense argument. That would be the defense. If you're like talking, legal lawyer nonsense, you would say, okay, this guy is a product of his environment. The CIA, they went ahead and facilitated these operations. They tried to radicalize young Arab youths to fight the Soviet Union, and they were in all over. They were in way over their head. Imagine if they start going back into Operation Cyclone and start investigating the actual tactics the CIA was doing to radicalize people to fight the Soviet Union,
spending millions of dollars on like children's books that are like crazy radical images and shit.
Exactly. Like spending money on putting money in programs to radicalize children through Islamist textbooks that preach Sunni Salafism. That's not going to look good in court.
No.
And this is a very high profile court case.
Right. And with what happens with the U.S. I'm not a lawyer, but like as I understand it, what happens with the U.S. court system is that like you have to prove, beyond a reasonable doubt that someone is like guilty, right? And like this will start this argument. While it's not a good argument against, it's not a good argument to say, that it's fine, you killed people, no big deal. Like that probably won't save you. But what it does is it introduces enough doubt into the motives where maybe he gets off with lighter sentencing, you know?
And I guess the real threat is that this thing is going to just blow the lid off of a lot of these covert operations that were taking place.
Right.
Because think about this. This is not so long after the Iran-Contra scandal.
Right. And that was a fucking shit show by itself.
It was basically Iran-Contra and Operation Cyclone are really similar in how they were operating. Iran-Contra was more illegal because the Congress passed a specific amendment, the Boland Amendment, to prohibit the funding of the Contras. Right. There was never an amendment to.
There's no Boland Amendment against the Mujahideen, you know?
Yeah, that was kind of universally accepted. You know, there was a movie made about it. Like, there was not Rocky 3, Rambo 3. I keep on calling. I always, someone pointed this out to me. There's like, stop calling Rocky Rambo. And then I also made a huge mistake. I called Lethal Weapon Die Hard.
Yeah.
I referenced a Lethal Weapon. Said it was a Die Hard reference. I'm sorry for that. The biggest errors I've made on this show.
It's funny, we get those wrong, but we can get like Khalid Sheikh Mohammed right, and we can get like Sheikh Rahman correct. You know, it's weird.
Yeah. It shows the level of dedication. We dive so deep into this investigative work that we don't know normal pop culture, and we just get our wires crossed constantly. But this is where, I kind of, between now and like going to September. So we're in the year 1995 right now. We know that there's these people taking flight. We have been handed evidence that there are Al-Qaeda cells in flight schools, but all this evidence is disregarded. How do you pick up this story from here?
I mean, shit. Well, like, I feel like you have to kind of go back again, right? Because a lot of this is like a product of these like series of missteps, and we're talking about like dozens and dozens of times where we could have prevented all of these things, and I think Salem, the informant, the Egyptian informant that was working with Nancy Floyd, the guy who stopped the Day of Terror, I think he kind of points it out really well in and I'm paraphrasing here, but he was saying something along the lines of like, this is, if you just let me do my job, we would have been able to get it. And I think there's just like constant negligence on the part of like both the U.S. like Fed, the investigators, the FBI, the CIA, just like, and not all of them were connected initially, but it was just like this collection of bullshit that just kept happening.
Well, one of the arguments for creating a national security state is that we need to have these intelligence agencies linking up with each other. Like, there needs to be one nexus rather than, the FBI and the CIA having, having separate intelligence and working independently. Like, there has to be one national security state that works together.
Right.
To avoid mistakes like this. That was the conclusion of the 9/11 Commission.
Right.
It's like, all right, we just need like a better.
We need better communications.
We need better intelligence agencies. We need more money into our intelligence agencies, and we just need one national super system to keep track of everyone.
What's funny about that is I was listening to the just before the show, I was listening to the Scott Horton interview with Peter. Oh shit! Give me the name again.
Lance.
Peter Lance. Thank you. With Peter Lance, the guy who wrote this timeline, the Triple Cross timeline, and they were talking about how, like, as recently as like 2010, the FBI hasn't had like a digitized system for cases, like a digital system. It's all been like paper, like analog and shit. So up to we have all these people during the 9/11 committee whose conclusion was we need to put more money into the national security state to make them communicate better. And one of the projects was to like update and digitize their like case files so that, you know, field agents and shit like that could easily access information from the entire network, you know, and to be able to do their job better, right? So there's better communication on that front. Apparently they invested like hundreds of millions of dollars into a system and it fucked up. And then they had to spend another hundreds of millions of dollars on Lockheed. Lockheed came and tried and set them up with a new system. But like, we're talking about 2 attempts to get it done and they still fucked it up. But I guess, you know, for all the libertarians out there that are listening, probably just more and more evidence as to
what makes Lockheed the most qualified vendor to do something like that.
I don't fucking know.
Like, they make fucking airplanes.
I mean, I imagine that they have an IT department. You know?
They have an IT department, but couldn't you find couldn't Oracle compete for that, or
maybe
Microsoft, or one of the
maybe,
you know, thousands of tech companies, even Apple?
Maybe.
Couldn't they have competed for that? That is, how does Lockheed, because they have the right clearance levels? It's like comes to clearance
probably.
Because we have a certification that allows us to deal with a certain level of clearance. So we're able to handle these classified documents. We can't trust this with a vendor such as Oracle or, you know, a third-party vendor. Like, I mean, these companies can get the same certifications, I'm sure, or whatever clearance. Like,
or they could just set it up where the data gets anonymized, right? Like you can make the system and then just be like, okay, cool. Just click this button and hit upload for all your documents. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
But I can definitely see the risk in having a system like that. Like,
yeah, totally. It could be hacked, right? It could be.
Isn't that what the fear is, that system's not going to be used to arrest actual dangerous criminals. It's going to be used to
against, like, American citizens. Yeah,
against
exactly.
you
yeah.
for you know,
whatever. Yeah.
For taxes or something, for not paying your taxes in time, or
right.
You know, a non-violent crime that you really shouldn't be going to jail for. I mean, that's what it's going to be used for.
Right. Well, I mean, you know,
so I'm very suspicious about having a super intelligent, like a national database.
Yeah.
That
has all of the case files for everything. Yeah. No, I get it. I get it. But look, it's a tough fucking argument, right? Because, like, as we've been talking about this entire situation, right? It's like each of these, you know, whether it was the CIA, you know, funding the Mujahideen and understanding that little pet project of theirs definitely went sour really quickly because it created all of these terrorist organizations that they ended up monitoring afterwards, or whether it be domestically where the FBI is literally watching suspected terrorists and, like, you know, has moles implanted in them and, you know, is literally getting so much evidence that they're about to do something, but, you know, keeps fucking up at every single step of the way, you know? And neither of these, you know, branches are really communicating with one another, or at least they're not doing so effectively. And they certainly weren't doing an effective job at communicating that to local law enforcement to help them along the way. And don't even get me started on international cooperation of intelligence, you know, like specifically with the Philippines and, you know, the information that we got out of Manila. From Mendoza, like, that bred the level of incompetence that led to attacks like 9/11. Like, that nonsense did it. And so when someone tells me, yeah, we should have one system where it's just like everyone can get all the data that they need to do their job, that makes sense to me. I totally hear your point, though. But, you know, it's like, especially in the time.
I don't think it was the database. I think it was either the internal politics that completely trying to think of the best word.
I hear what you're saying, but
the internal that derailed any type of, like, real investigation and monitoring of these cells in the United States, or it was just willful ignorance.
But the thing
Like
about
it's either or.
the thing about the paper trail stuff though is like analog is that it's super easy to destroy, right? So like I get it, office politics will definitely do some shit, but imagine you have office politics and then the ability to destroy evidence. I mean, if you remember when we were talking about the handover, from Manila to the United States of information that we had terrorists in our country that were training in flight schools, it was fairly easy to doctor that information on paper, and say and not include the fact that people were training here, or in the many other cases that just kind of where the evidence just kind of disappeared miraculously, like how we just were saying this before, how Muhammad had admitted that Al-Qaeda was creating an army and it was trying to overthrow the government of Saudi Arabia and also wants to come attack the World Trade Center, right? But that miraculously disappeared. The thing with digital is that like there would be a a digital paper trail, if you will, and you can see when people have entered things and when people have deleted things, and potentially you can recover those things. You know what I mean? It's just so much easier to just get rid of a paper document. It's almost like it'll be as if it never existed.
And you can disregard the paper document as well, just like how when George Bush received a memo saying on August 6th, so less than a month before, or a little bit more than a month, I'm bad up with math, saying Bin Laden determined to attack in the United States on August 6th.
Right.
So 35 days prior.
Something like that, yeah. I mean, he read it and he's like, oh, okay. Sounds interesting. Let me know how that works out. And then he just like ignored it,
So what's interesting is that is the lack of communication between the FBI and the CIA. Mm-hmm. So I pulled up this old New York Times article that was released right after the 9/11 congressional report, and the title is called 9/11 Congressional Report Faults FBI CIA Lapses. The September 11th attacks were preventable, but the plot went undetected because of communication lapses between the FBI and CIA, which failed to share intelligence related to two hijackers, a congressional report to be released on Thursday says. The report by a joint committee of House and Senate intelligence panels found that nearly 2 years before the attacks, the CIA knew about the terror connections between the two men, Khalid al-Midhar and Nawak al-Hazami, who in 2000 moved to San Diego, frequently Muslim circles that the FBI had infiltrated. Some people who have seen the report said its central findings was that the intelligence agency had shared this information and that if the FBI had used its informants more aggressively, the presence of Mr. Midhar and Mr. al-Hazami in San Diego offered the best chance to unravel the September 11th plot. The report was described as a scathing critic of the two agencies in the months before the attacks, saying they failed to counter the threat from Al-Qaeda, even though they had known for years that its leader, Osama bin Laden, was determined to attack the United States. Parts of the report have been disclosed by various news organizations in the past week. CIA officials did not alert the FBI or place the names of the two men on a watch list until August 2001, weeks before the attacks. No FBI informants, some of whom had contact with the two, were altered that they might have belonged to Al-Qaeda.
Okay, so like the whole point of this is that the FBI had known about this for years, and if they were more aggressive with that information, they would have been able to stop this. And it wasn't, and because of this, the CIA wasn't able to. Actually, I got that backwards. CIA
The CIA knew
knew
about
for years,
this,
right?
knew for years, and they
And
didn't tell the FBI.
didn't tell the FBI, and the FBI had informants that they could have used more aggressively, right, to figure it out, but they didn't. And it wasn't until just like August 2001, days before, 35 days, as you said, before 9/11, that they were able to put these guys on a watch list.
Well, that August 4th, that's when the memo went to George Bush.
Right.
So that memo went from the CIA to the FBI after the memo went to Bush.
Mm.
So not giving them much time at all.
Mm-hmm. To do very much at all, yeah.
And it wasn't just it wasn't just the CIA. So here's another article. The CIA was given data on Hijacker long before 9/11. American investigators were given the first name and telephone number. This is from the New York Times. American investigators were given the first name and telephone number of the September 11th hijackers 2.5 years before the attacks on New York and Washington, but the United States appears to have failed to pursue the lead aggressively, American and German officials say. In March 1999, German intelligence officials gave the CIA the first name and telephone numbers of Marwan al-Shahi and asked the Americans to track him. The name and phone number in the UAE had been obtained by the Germans by monitoring the telephone of Mohammed Haider Zamar, an Islamic militant in Hamburg who was closely linked to the important Al-Qaeda plotters who ultimately masterminded the September 11th attacks, German officials said. After the Germans passed the information on to the CIA, they did not hear from the Americans about the matter until after September 11th, a senior German intelligence official said. There was no response at the time, the official said, after receiving the tip. The CIA decided that Marwan was probably an associate of Osama bin Laden, but never tracked him down, American officials say.
So it's like after 9/11, they were like, hey, German guys, what was that you were saying about this dude again? We kind of need that information now.
And take in mind how many attacks that have happened between 1995 or just the World Trade Center bombing and 9/11. Like, we're talking about an embassy bombing.
Right. There was an embassy bombing.
That the FBI/CIA double, triple agent was scouting and taking pictures. Ali Muhammad was involved in that bombing.
He took the pictures. He brought the pictures to bin Laden, and bin Laden himself pointed like, that's where I want the bomb to go. And guess what? Like a year later, the bomb went there and it exploded and killed people.
So there was intelligence from other countries about this.
Yep.
And then there is the complicity of other countries that may have been monitoring and not telling the U.S. about some of these agents or some of these Al-Qaeda cells. Saudi Arabia, the 28 pages of the joint inquiry into the 9/11 attacks, they were dismissed. They were treated as just whatever. Do you remember when that came out? No one was like, oh, the 28 pages are coming out.
Right.
Everyone was like, oh, yeah, it's just, whatever.
Interesting. Yeah, whatever.
It's interesting. Which really makes no sense because it shows that the Saudi government, including top officials like Prince Bandar bin Sultan,
right.
Bandar Bush.
Bandar
they call
Bush.
They call him Bandar Bush because has a really close relationship with the Bush family.
Right.
They're very close friends. They financed and actively aided hijackers prior to 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
And Prince Bandar went on to become head of Saudi intelligence.
Uh-oh.
I don't know. Should we open this can of worms right now? Because this just might be another.
Maybe. I feel like that could be its own topic in and of itself.
Let's save this for another day. But they were basically, Saudi princes were funding 9/11 hijackers through using their wives as intermediaries. So their wives are doing it,
right?
But they were giving money through their wives. And then the Mossad, So the people at 9/11, the people arrested for filming and celebrating 9/11 were Israelis connected to the Mossad.
Mm-hmm.
One of them had $4,700 in cash hidden in his sock, and they had foreign passports, and they were actively monitoring these guys as well. Does it obviously makes sense for them to monitor to tell people it makes sense for them to monitor Al-Qaeda, but it's hard for me to believe that these agencies did not have prior knowledge of the attacks. Like, I think it's very clear.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm telling you, man, at best, it's just a series of fuck-ups.
I'm not a 9/11 truther.
No. It's not about whether or not this was an inside job or not. I don't think that's like a question. What it's about is like how fucking stupid they were. I find that more interesting. I find that more damning. It'd be easier to think that this was an inside job.
You think that's the Occam's razor?
Yeah, it would be because of how fucking stupid they were. You know, like
here's the thing. It's not in. I don't think it's an inside job as in the United States attacked itself.
Right. Exactly.
Like I think that's ridiculous. Like, so the thing about 9/11 truthers that I just don't. I've always been incredibly turned off from it. And, my initial reaction to 9/11 truth has always been just like, you're an unpatriotic piece of shit. How dare you say that we did this to ourselves? That was Al-Qaeda. Right. That was always my initial reaction.
Right.
Now my reaction is like, you're really like, how dumb are you? Do you think that, why would they use, because the conspiracies get crazier and crazier.
Right. Well, I mean, the deeper you go, if you go deep enough, it starts talking about fucking lizard people and shit. So that's the territory that you go down when you're
missiles hitting the Pentagon, denying that a plane was hijacked. Saying hologram planes, talking about bombs on every single floor, and the obsession over Building 7 being a controlled demolition. Like, why? I don't understand why those were the obsessions on this.
Right. Why was it not the obsession, the fact that we had known about this for so long, or that we kept fucking up and could have stopped it several times before?
Why wasn't the scandal that the people who did it were CIA operatives at least one time or another?
Right.
Like they were, their origin story is that it was a CIA program.
Right, and that's about as close as it gets for it being an inside job. You know what I mean?
It's like we funded these people who eventually, in the best case, turned on us. It was a double cross.
Right, best case.
But it's just nuts, and I don't blame truthers for coming to the conclusion that the U.S. did this to have a pretext to get into the Iraq War, because I mean, Dick Cheney and company, they might as well have. I mean, they definitely
took full advantage of it. Yeah,
they definitely exploited the catastrophe to build the national security state and to falsely link 9/11 to Iraq
and to basically shit on all of our civil liberties too. Hello.
Exactly.
Patriot Act.
I don't know. It just pisses me off beyond.
I honestly think like it's the complicated story, the one of all of these ridiculous fuck ups, and then all of the people who either capitalized on a fuck up or exploited it or used it as a way to get to run free. That story is way more fascinating to me, and I think should as you point out should be the big news. That should be the thing that people talk about.
I think, yeah, exactly. I mean, within this story alone, between Operation Cyclone and just like the entire foreign policy of the 1980s, with creating these privateer armies,
Right.
because that's what they are.
This was Iran Contra 2.0, basically.
I mean, it was
the
Iran.
Consequences sucked, but for us, but I mean, the story kind of started off the same way.
Well, I mean, they both happened at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
This started. They both pretty much started with the Carter administration, and then they were taken to a new level by the Reagan administration.
Right.
Because it was Brzezinski who was the one who came up with the plan to bog the Soviets down into their own Vietnam-style war, and from then on, the CIA and Congress, they fully committed to arming and radicalizing the Muslim world to fight the Soviet Union.
Because they thought that was better than the Soviet Union.
The lessons of 9/11 should be to never fund and arm a group from that part of the world ever again. And I totally just stole that from Dave Smith. I think he says that in like his intro or something.
I mean, I'd go farther.
But
than
it was
that and
such
say
a good
just never
point.
fund and arm any group, any radical group. Period. Anywhere in the world,
And we still do it to this day.
Yep.
Or at least we were doing it. I probably still are doing it right now.
What about like the Operation Fast and Furious or whatever, where we're like selling fucking guns down, in Mexico and shit for the cartel?
I don't actually know too much about that.
Yeah, we should probably learn about that. Let's do an episode on that. That one's
Operation Fast and Furious.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm ignorant of what's going on in my own hemisphere. All right. Is there anything that we should be adding to this?
I mean, we skipped lots of shit, but honestly, I don't think that it's possible to, to go over this even in 2 episodes in any great detail. And that's why, I think this is kind of like a little pet project of ours. We're very interested in the topic. Maybe in the future we'll come out with some more, detailed stuff, or maybe we'll isolate specific stories, within this, because I think each of these side stories that we get super excited about, they can almost warrant their own episode, So we'll keep you guys informed on this. Hope you like the history, yeah. What do you want to say?
Yeah, Danny and I had a conversation before this episode. We started airing this episode. So the issue with this topic is that it's just like, it's really impossible to do this without spending 50 hours on just one episode, because there's so many things that need to be compiled together. So we're kind of not, this is an hour and 20-minute podcast. So, take it at, take what you're going to get from it, and obviously do your own research. But we're planning on, we've been talking about releasing some more shows kind of outside bro history realm on this topic. We'll keep you posted on what the plan is.
Oh yeah.
All right, are we ending this thing?
Yeah, I suppose so. It's a good point. # free Britney.
Okay, I actually have somebody who counters your I was talking to my sister about the same topic, and she told me to tell you that you're dead wrong about your.
Oh, bring her on the show. Let's have a debate.
You're dead wrong about Britney Spears.
So is she crazy? Is she like legit crazy, according to your sister?
She's legitimately crazy. And
# free Britney.
I don't even know if I want to say exactly what she said, because it was. Yeah, she said that she's obviously insane. She's obviously can't take care of herself right now, and that she is and she was probably abused while she was in Disney, and lives in a perpetual child. Well, because she was in the Mickey Mouse crew,
Mickey Mouse Club.
Mickey Mouse Club.
Yeah.
She was probably abused when she was in Mickey Mouse Club and has perpetual childhood like Michael Jackson.
I
So
mean, yeah,
she's-
those are good points, but I'm happy to debate on this.
If you want to debate.
This is like a stupid topic that I'm so interested in for no reason.
I don't know. She doesn't seem like she's sane. I'll be completely transparent.
Leave Britney alone.
Her Rose project, the evidence that she was showing me was like, did you see her Rose project? And I was like, what's her Rose project? And it's just like a picture after picture of her with a rose.
Yeah, dude, you should like read. I mean, some of this shit
And
gets
it's
into
very
like,
weird. It's very
some of this
very
shit gets
weird.
into like kind of conspiracy theory, but you should like you should like see some of the like I think I mentioned this on the show before, but there was this one time where on Reddit or some shit like that, one of the users was like, yo, Brittany, if you're really in danger, wear a yellow shirt on your next Instagram thing. And then her next Instagram picture, she's wearing a yellow shirt and she's got like yellow flowers and all this like mad yellow shit. It's like not a coincidence at all. I don't know. It gets a little bit conspiracy theory-ish, but like I tend to fall on the side of like Britney's probably being taken advantage of. Probably.
I don't know. Both huge mysteries. I don't know which one is more important though.
This or the 9/11 thing. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Only history will tell what will be taught in the history books. All right, guys. Hopefully you all enjoy this episode. Make sure that you rate and review the podcast. And rate and review the podcast. And if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to it. And we will see you next week.
See ya.